Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and I got a couple systems I want to check in on today. These systems were very damp last week, so one of the things we did was remove the plastic covers. In the place of the plastic covers went newspaper covers. So that's what you're seeing here. And the other thing we did was we attempted to blend in some nice dry, well, not overly dry, but not overly wet either. We took some of my prepared bedding, and that stuff I've got pretty much on standby all the time here in this container. And I think it was still, well, it might have been a previous batch, but I mean, this stuff certainly isn't overly damp. It's definitely got moisture to it. I mean, I do have some dry shredded paper cardboard that we could use if we felt like blending in dry bedding might actually help. But I mean, between blending in dry and switching off the covers to something more breathable, I'm hoping that we're going to see a little bit of improvement after 13 days. So we're going to get those systems up on the bench and we're going to get them fed. So let's get to work. If we feel it helped, I've got this batch of dry shredded paper cardboard. So we'll see if it helped. If we feel like we'd like to include more, then we could. Like I said, the shredded paper cardboard stuff that I threw in last time was the prepared bedding type. It's got leaves and moisture, and the stuff that I just showed you a moment ago is actually completely dry. So let's, I don't know. Let's see how things look. I mean, a lot of times just having newspaper only coverings results in a top surface that's almost dry, and this stuff feels almost like it's got a fair bit of moisture content to it. This is so unusual. I don't know how it is that I find chunks of eggshell, pretty good sized stuff, because I usually grind everything up when I'm preparing eggshells to be grit. I grind this stuff up to be very minute. So chunks of eggshell like that, I don't know where they come from. Alright. So I'm going for the middle of the bin. There was nothing to indicate where we last fed, but usually if that's the case, I default to the assumption that I probably just fed down the middle of the bin, which is where I typically place my feedings, unless I've got something specific going on. And then in those cases, I'll almost always mark where we're going to feed, so we know next time where the food was applied last. This time when we're done, we'll have a couple of coffee filters to use as feeding zone indicators, because what I thought as a possible good semi-dry feeding for them would be coffee. I mean, yeah, you take the coffee out of the coffee machine after you've brewed some coffee, but you know, for the most part, the liquid all passes through, and it does leave the coffee a little bit damp. But I don't treat the application of coffee as something that's bringing with it a great deal of moisture. So I thought that perhaps systems where moisture was riding a bit high, we might benefit from tailoring the feeding to be stuff that doesn't bring with it a whole bunch of undue moisture. Corn cobs were clearly on the menu recently. I don't know if they were possibly part of the last feeding. I did skim through the video really quick just to orient myself to what was done here last time. Clearly it didn't leave much of a mark. I mean, I didn't like sit down and watch the whole thing. I might have just, you know, kind of scrubbed through the video in the video player, and then just kind of visually tried to recap in my mind what we did last time in here. And I think we've prepared plenty of space here into which today's feeding can go. The other thing I have here is another object designed for absorbing moisture, if you think about it. It's a napkin. So I'm wondering if perhaps if this could be today's bedding, but I don't want to just have a bunch of napkin matting up on itself. I figured if we kind of work it in. This has coffee in it too, not much, so why don't we try to use up what remains of this coffee before we tap into the 2 filters, a couple days worth of coffee in the plastic container over there. So this napkin already got a little jump start on absorbing moisture for us. I placed it in with the it was slid in over here next to, I think this is the coffee that I just took out of the machine. It still has some moisture content to it, so we'll follow suit here with trying to kind of insulate the paper from itself. All right. Now we can come in with even more. And I've even got another napkin. Perhaps we can go with somewhat smaller layers and somehow squeeze in another napkin. This filter seems to have given up what it had. And before we get too far along, let's check out these corn cobs. These things went in pretty recently. I don't even see any hollowing out happening yet, so I'm probably not going to be able to snap these. I won't even bother trying. But I figured before we get all of today's fresh food added, why don't we also come right in with the leftovers. Now, let's see. I've got a couple more napkins that I'd love to do away with here, and it seems like if we follow the feeding approach that I started into here with the coffee resting in between layers of napkin, the napkin seems like it has a pretty good likelihood of getting nibbled away by the wormies. So let's see how that goes. You know, I wanted to include some of my worm chow, which is also another dry food. I grind up all kinds of seeds. Usually it's a collection of pepper seeds and cantaloupe melon seeds, pumpkin seeds, whatever I've got on hand. And it's I would assume that it's a pretty nutrition packed, energy packed meal, since it's all seeds and stuff, which I always assumed was a pretty good way to go as far as feeding the wormies. And that's our feeding for today. Heck, why don't we just top it all off with just a little bit more of the yummy worm chow. Alright. Try to not send all the food overboard, so we didn't even have to, well, I mean, we still have the option to. We haven't really explored what the outer edges of the systems look like. So why don't we set these filters aside briefly. We'll mark where we last fed using the traditional feeding zone indicator approach. There's still a good bit of moisture in this material. You might have even noticed like some of these large clumps sort of holding together. So you know what? I think the saying's, the saying's true that you can never add too much bedding. So why don't we go ahead and we try to at least blend in a little bit more on this go around too. It's probably going to end up really benefiting the system substantially with just fresh bedding type materials floating around all over the place. And the other benefit, I suppose, is that it's going in dry. It'll have its opportunity to suck in some of the moisture from the surrounding materials, and then perhaps in another check-in or two we'll start to feel like perhaps the moisture in these systems isn't so terribly high after all. But for now, it does seem like doing what we're doing here is going to be a beneficial thing. So I just also thought it might be worth mentioning that the material over here in bin number 1 does not seem quite as damp as what was in bin number 2, at least on the side that we're working on now. So just a little bit of food for thought. That looks pretty good. Why don't we give a similar treatment to the edge closer to me here, and then we'll be done. pretty sure we blended in bedding type materials all over the place last time too. And as I go through the material here and there, I see little scraps of things that look like they're probably bedding, you know, but it also seems to me like the worms have been busy nibbling on this stuff. So, I mean, it's fair to assume that the stuff on the surface might not be quite as damp as you would want it to be, since it was covered only with newspaper, leading to worms maybe not coming up there to work on much of that bedding type material. But what we submerged down into the bed, I believe, is exposed to a good bit of moisture down in there, and is able to get a nice bit of worm traffic around itself. So there we go. Definitely another little bit of a sort of sidestep from my typical routine. This is not typical for me, what we're doing here, blending in bedding like this. Although I would have to say that there were probably numerous times in the past when taking this approach probably would have saved me a lot of hassle and headache and grief. So perhaps what we're doing here is a good model for dealing with issues in the future, rather than just sort of, you know, not dealing with them the right way and then seeing matters go from bad to worse. So here I think we're on the road to recovery from a moisture perspective and manageability perspective. I think the humidity's been dropping too. It's been a humid summer, but we're finally starting to see a little bit drier, cooler air, which is refreshing as well. So we'll see how these systems come along. For now, I think we're in pretty good shape, and I can't even remember, did I even pull this out? I prepared this nice little diagram or information board telling you all about the system and its statistics. I might have mentioned it verbally already, but I figured, heck, I already made this thing. Let's at least use it once before the video's over. Alright everyone, that's it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.